Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWEG. We are excited for this week as it is National Civics Learning Week. And at MWEG, we want to be part of that narrative. And so we have asked Glori Smith and Lisa Rampton Halverson, who are both Civics Research Fellows at Utah Valley University at the Center for Constitutional Studies, to join us and talk to us about civics and kind of define it for us and tell us a little bit how civics plays a role in politics and how they're different and maybe how we can get our kids involved. But first, I was going to ask Lisa and Glori to kind of tell us a little bit of how they got involved in the world of teaching civics and what their interest is to be drawn to that. So I'm going to turn the time over to them.
Well, it's so good to be with you, Rachel, and be doing this for MWEG. As many of the viewers will know, I've been involved with MWEG since its beginning, and if it were not for MWEG, I wouldn't be in the Civics Research Fellow position I'm now in, because that got me fired up. I loved my work with MWEG, and when I saw this position advertised, even though I don't have all the credentials Glori has, I knew it was something I wanted to do.
And Glori, how did you get involved with civics?
Okay, well, I feel like I've been involved with civics my entire life. If civics is at least somewhat equated with loving history and social studies, I loved that subject area from the time I was in third grade. And so, and then I grew up and became a history teacher, and eventually government. And so I suppose the real interest in civics, as I understand it now, came when I started teaching government. I started teaching, well, I've taught mainstream government, but I actually first started with advanced placement government and then concurrent enrollment government through UVU. And so teaching at that higher level, the college level, with the very engaged high school students, really made me realize the lack of information I had and what I wanted to share with students and what engaged them. And I found out quickly that engaging students with beyond what they were supposed to learn for a big test at the end of the year or what the textbook said, that engaging them with how that related to what's happening in the world today. And any given day, whether you're looking at a hard copy newspaper or a screen of current news, something that's happening today, and probably several somethings relate to our Constitution. And so that's how I really got involved. That's how I got, yeah, that's it. There's a little more to my background than that. That's why I'm with it where I am and why I love now working with college students and teachers to improve civics education.
Glori spent 30 years in the high school social studies classroom, so she's really an expert on this. And then we pulled her out of retirement to do this position. We're just incredibly lucky to have her. Glori's love for civics, unfortunately, that hasn't necessarily been true at the national and the state levels. For the last 50 years, our nation has poured so many funds into STEM, which is important, but we've seemed to just let civics slide, and the funding isn't there, the resources aren't there, the testing isn't there, which is, definitely one motivator for teachers and principals to make room for civics. None of that's been there. For every $1,000 given to STEM, we've been giving $1 to civics. But fortunately, I think that's starting to change. Utah created this, gave funding to the Center for Constitutional Studies 2 years ago. And in the legislative session that just wrapped up, they've even increased our funding at the national level. We're starting to see some attention to civics. So hopefully we're having a bit of a sea change here, because we definitely need it as a nation, and we need to be teaching civics to our kids.
That's definitely true. Let's see, I'm looking at some notes that we forgot. We actually got excited last year to find out about civics season, and then this year learning about civics week. The civics season is a national movement to recognize some time in the summer, depending on the state, and that we have a lot of landmarks. And Utah has kind of expanded the weeks actually from early June to late July, because we include American Indian Citizen Act Day, the Loving Day, marking the Loving Supreme Court decision, Flag Day on June 14th, Juneteenth, the anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, Independence Day, Pioneer Day, and more. So that's really exciting to us, that there's so much happening right now in civics. So Lisa's right, there's been a real dearth of attention paid to civics for the last 50 years, but that has really changed, and I would say the last at least 10 years. And I was actually, Lisa talked about me coming out of retirement. One reason I came out of retirement, I thought, wow, I really need to do this because this is really important, and who else will do it? Well, since I've taken this position and we've been working together, we're finding out that there are people all over the country and all over Utah, a lot of different organizations doing this same work. Lisa, of course, is with MWEG, but one of the reasons that I forgot to mention, and one of the reasons I'm sure helped me land the position at UVU, was that I'm involved with Braver Angels, which is a civic or a citizens grassroots effort to bring America together, to not let America fall apart. And we often focus on the red and the blue, and just bringing people together for conversations. We find that when people talk to each other, they find that we're much more similar than we are different. And we also, it's really interesting to find that we have many of the exact same goals. We just find different ways to get there, but people are working for the same things. And when they learn to talk to each other or give that a chance, they find a lot of commonality and a lot of ways we can work together and improve our country. So I'm excited about how many people are working on civics right now.
With this Civics Week, which I think this is the first year they're doing this, and Gloria and I were watching a streaming coming from the National Archives building just yesterday, and as we were thinking about what we wanted to say today, some of our thoughts are influenced by things we were listening to just yesterday. So Rachel asked, what is civics? How is it different from politics? And so, really civics is pretty synonymous with citizenship. Some people say instead of civics education, they say citizenship education. And we're not so much talking about the legal definition, are you legally a citizen or not, but being a citizen in the broader sense of being someone who, historically, before there was the sense of citizenship, which came, which the American Revolution and our independence and our Constitution all came out of the sense that we were citizens, not simply subjects. And so when you're a citizen, you are engaged, you are responsible, you are having some decision in who represents you. And so that's why we say civics education is pretty synonymous with citizenship education. What does it mean for us to be involved in our government? So when we study civics, we look at what are our rights as a citizen? Not only what are our rights, but what are our responsibilities as a citizen? And MWEG builds its principles of ethical government around those two pillars, and also the pillar of rule of law, which I think is important in civics education too. So, when we say we're involved in civics education, we're not just talking about, do you know that there are 3 branches of government? And do you know that so-and-so is the Speaker of the House or the President of the United States? We're not just talking the content knowledge, we're also talking like the skills. Can you analyze a text and tell whether it's is it verifiable? Is it based on facts, or is it just some made up set of things trying to pull at our emotions? Do you have the dispositions of a citizen? Do you love your country? Are you willing to sacrifice for them, even if that sacrifice means making sure you get your vote in in the mail, or you stand in line for your vote. So all of these things are part of civics education. I think one that's really important is that in civics, we work hard to protect our own rights, but we also work hard to protect the rights of others. Those that are more vulnerable, those that are less empowered. We work hard to protect their rights as well. So Glori, you came up with some other ideas about what civic education means.
We also, Lisa already mentioned the responsibility of citizenships, but it's also of citizenship and the responsibility of protecting ours and other rights. It's also that we have the responsibility to do what it takes to perpetuate our democratic republic that we live in and that most of us love. And that students need the opportunity students need to learn that they have a responsibility to engage. It's not okay just to sit back and be happy that that you were lucky enough to be born here. Some other ideas actually that I got from that Civics Week presentation that Lisa and I both watched yesterday were just some ideas, and I believe these came from students, high school students that they had there. But they thought that they were asking them what civic education meant, and these are just some blurbs, that it's the best way to learn how to be a citizen, that it's a love language that enables us to engage and connect with others who may differ from us in many ways. It helps students learn that that all of us are the government, and that it encompasses all subject areas, not just social studies. The need to be active and contributing citizens goes across the curriculum, and all subject areas can help us teach civics and help us be better citizens.
Yeah, watching those kids was really inspiring. These teenagers, they were so eloquent. They clearly had leadership experience, and in their civics education, whether it was from classes or extracurricular activities that they'd been involved with, like what's the United Nations one, where the students act like they're, in any case, they just were really, really excited. So, Rachel said, what's the difference between civics and politics? Glori, will you kind of tell us what you were thinking about?
They're very closely related. They are very closely related, but they're not the same thing. Politics is usually defined as the art and science of government, and citizens create governments. So learning civic knowledge, skills, and dispositions allows citizens to engage responsibly and help build our government and protect the government systems and structures. But sometimes the word politics and politicians is sometimes sadly used as a pejorative. But politicians that are civically engaged and civically minded are helping to build and improve society through responsible actions, not through self-serving actions and actions that would just help to build their power or even possibly wealth. So they're very close. Civics and politics are closely related. They work together, but definitely have a little bit of a different nuance, I think, when we talk about civics.
And as I was thinking about it, so within MWEG, my role for the last probably 2 years has been helping kind of explicate and helping us as an organization understand how our principles of ethical government determine what we stand behind when we take advocacy action. We have decided to root those in our principles of ethical government. So I thought, I need to make sure I talk about PEG's principles of ethical government during this thing. And then as I looked at them and I thought about citizenship and citizen education, I'm like, it's almost all the same thing, while government is and politics is something different, when we stand up for our rights, when we recognize our responsibilities, when we back the rule of law, we are being engaged citizens. And, so MWEG has 3 overarching principles, and then under each principle, we kind of break them down. Our first one is rule of law, and we say every government official and institution has a duty to respect the rule of law, including accepted processes for how the law is to be established. legislative branch, executed, which is our executive branch, and interpreted, our judicial branch. So while this of our principles focuses a bit more on the institutions, then when we break it down, we say all of these ways that we need to expect our institutions, our politicians to adhere to the rule of law. That is our civic engagement, our engagement as citizens. And we talk about the pillar of rights, and MWEG states it this way: every human being is endowed with rights that governments are obligated to protect and not violate. These include both universal human rights, such as the right to life and liberty, as well as civil rights, such as the rights to equitable political representation and equal protection under the law. So here, once again, as a citizen would do, as we would do as we are civically engaged, we are standing up for our rights and the rights of others, trying to protect those rights. And then the third pillar for MWEG's principles of ethical government has to do with responsibility. And we say all human beings are mutually accountable to their fellow human beings in their local communities, their countries, and the world. So there too, it's that responsibility. You know, we look back at Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, and he says, he's there on the battlefield saying, these men have not died in vain if we, the living, continue what the dead fought for. If we too, if we take that responsibility to preserve the rights of others. So MWEG's principles of ethical government are all over civics and civic engagement. And I loved reminding myself of that connection. So, yeah.
Lisa, one of the things that keeps coming to my mind, and one of the notes that I wrote down was, I feel like civics is the humanity of citizenship. It's like really looking at our citizenship as humans, as other people, as contributors, rather than as laws, as rules, like those different things, even though they all intertwine, like you were saying. But it's it really feels like the human element to those laws that are being made that seem kind of out of touch if you're maybe not in the room making them or at the Capitol, you know, fighting for those things. But then it's the humanity and it's the community part.
Definitely.
Of the laws. So that's what I just kept thinking. It's the humanity part of citizenship.
Yeah, I think you're right. It helps us make the connection between those structures and those things that we have to learn, and maybe some of us went to school where it was just memorizing these ideas and, you know, for a test, but then connecting them to people and us. And when you were saying it's kind of the humanity, I was also thinking that civics helps us see people that disagree with us not as adversaries so much as fellow citizens, certainly not as enemies. As Abraham Lincoln said in his first inaugural address, we are not enemies, we are friends, and we must remember that. And so we often quote that the other part of that quote is talking about looking to our better angels so that we can work with each other across differences instead of seeing fellow citizens as enemies, which is not helpful at all.
You know, our research team, when we first came on board, we did research about civics education. We talked to teachers, and close to the same time, one of the political science professors at UVU, Jada Sart, did survey research of Utah adults about their civic knowledge and their civic dispositions. And, you know, unfortunately, just like all Americans, Utahns were failing at their civic knowledge. But some of the questions were, you know, that civic knowledge. Do you know your First Amendment rights? I mean, it was in the single digits, those who could recognize or list all 5 of our First Amendment rights. But there were some other questions that were a bit more about, like, just the attitudes and the dispositions, like, do you trust your leaders? And unfortunately, the results were pretty dismal on that side as well. That same professor did another round of survey research that has just barely come out. And in that one, he was looking at what's called effective partisan polarization, which is kind of your feelings towards people across the lines. And sadly, those feelings are not too pleasant. And you're right that civics tells us, but we still can converse with each other. We're still in this together. We're still, Americans, and we shouldn't hate the people that are on the other side of the political divide. So, when we saw these results were kind of in contrast to our results, we found that teachers feel like they're doing a decent job. They're really trying hard. They don't always have the resources that they need, but they are trying to uphold both teach the civic knowledge, but also teach the skills and dispositions. So we're not sure, and we're continuing to do research about this. We're not sure why. Well, unless the teachers are totally like just confused, and I don't think they are. I think they are self-aware, and I think they know that they and their colleagues are trying to impart both civic knowledge and civic skills and dispositions to their students. But then why do Utah adults fail at understanding the importance of civics? We're not sure. Maybe it's just a time lag.Maybe it's that they had too much skill and drill on the topics and not enough of the kind of activities that really sink into your heart, like simulations or models or engaging discussions. We're not sure why this is going on, but
right. So far, the research that we've done, we've been trying to do basically a lit review of what works, so that we can see what there's two reasons. We're actually looking for a gap in the literature that we might experience, that we might then try to investigate. But also, if we can, as we teach and work with teachers across the state, if we can tell them, evidence is that these different methods or strategies in your classroom really work. We're finding across the board, both in research and just anecdotal stories, that it really takes both. We need the students need to learn the basic structures and some of the things that maybe people who, unlike me, didn't always find social studies class fascinating, but that sometimes the boring parts, I guess, that they do need some of that, but they need to tie it to some kind of action. And a lot of times we're talking these days about service learning, or as Lisa just said, simulations, like one of the students yesterday mentioned Model UN. Other people have talked about mock trial, and one that we've been really involved in is something that's big in Utah with our middle schools and junior highs anyway, is We the People, and they do simulated congressional hearings about constitutional topics. And those seem to be really important, really engaging, and students really remember what they learn. But if you do those things, particularly like a service learning activity, it might be what I like to call like a cool project, or something that they thought, this was really great, I did this in 8th grade. But if you don't tie it to knowing why that was important and how that's part of being a citizen, and tie it to your civic education and the things we learned about the Constitution or about our history, then it doesn't have the staying power. So it's like they need both. They need the knowledge, and then they need the cool project. And they need them both, and then students seem to be remembering. So I don't know, maybe we can do some surveys in 5 or 10 years after we get the word out, and maybe things will start to improve. I'm very hopeful that it will, because how much I've seen in the last 10 years, how many different organizations all across the country are really working to improve civic education and getting these messages out and doing really exciting things. We have one starting here in Utah that's, I'm a little bit uninformed on it, and I'm just throwing this out, it just came to my mind, but it's called My Impact Challenge. And it's trying to basically do like a science fair idea with civics, and where students come and show what they've done, kind of like they would show off their science experiment or a scientific investigation. They'll show off their civic investigation and the work they've done. And so we're going to be having one of those here in Utah very soon, and I'm excited about those kinds of ideas.
Glori, do you know, that will be hosted at UVU. Do you know, will it be open to just anyone? I mean, could we encourage our Utah Valley residents to come?
Well, I'm almost, yeah, I think, I want to say I'm 90% sure it's going to be open, but what I absolutely don't know is the date. So do you know the date? We're going to need to get back on that, I think.
Sure, I'll share on the MWEG Utah page when that gets more settled. I think it's Saturday, June 14th, but.
Oh, right on Flag Day. So it's part of civic season. That will be really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll fill you in with more information on the Utah page when we know all the details for sure. We've just begun, some of the event planning and things are still a teeny bit up in the air, but I think it's going to be June 14th at UVU. So come to the Civics Fair, just like you'd want to go to your child's science fair, bring your kids to the Utah Civics Fair, this My Impact Challenge.
That sounds like a really hopeful event, like to be able to go and see a younger generation getting involved and understanding how their involvement changes things, or at least changes attitudes, or different things. And what I love about civics, I mean, when you talk about civic season and that kind of thing, like that time of year, like nobody really cares who you voted for or what party you support. Like we all want to celebrate the 4th of July, and I'm not worried about who I'm inviting over to my house or who they voted for, right? Or I mean, right. Some people maybe, but I don't know those things. It's not a criteria that I set for celebrating Flag Day or any of it. Like that's the thing about civics, is it's a nonpartisan celebration of being American, of being a citizen in this country. And so I just really love that part of it, that we all get to play a part in it, that we're not singled out by party lines or any partisanship that way. So
you're definitely
really
right.
Lovely part.
You mentioned something else a minute ago, Rachel. You said something about it's so hopeful to go and see what the younger generation is doing. When you work with some of the younger generation, it is very hopeful. So when I was still teaching high school, the last few years I taught, I was the faculty sponsor of Model United Nations, and spending a day with my students who did Model United Nations. And I was really interesting about our team. It was very student driven. When I signed up as sure, I'll be your sponsor, I didn't know anything about Model United Nations. And I never really learned enough to teach the students how to do it. They taught each other. And then we would go to these great simulations where they would work with people representing different countries all across the world and come up with ideas to solve world problems. And when I would listen to them speak, and Poppy was just like, oh my gosh, the future is going to be fine. The younger generation is they are ready. And we've got some great leaders. And when you spend a day, Lisa and I both spent a day in March, or was it early March or was it late February? I don't even remember, but watching junior high kids do the We the People and their congressional simulations. And they are amazing. And they're, 12, 13, 14 years old. And they have great knowledge and great ideas. And it's really exciting. And it's very hopeful. I encourage anyone who's in despair to spend some time with students that are engaged, and you will be happy. You will come away going, okay, things are going to be fine.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we model good citizenship and that we encourage involvement, right? Because
Definitely.
It's definitely an action, as you were saying. Civics is an action that we go out. That's the humanity part, is that we go and interact with people and we do those things. And so as we just have to be good examples of it, so that we can say, okay, you've learned this information now in school. Now let me show you how you do it, right? How you be a good citizen. And so that's one of the great things of MWEG, is that it provides a lot of tools for our members to see how to have, we talk about practical peacemaking and how to have conversations and to interact with people that maybe we don't see eye to eye with politically. We talk about being responsible media consumers, and just all of those things work into this civics, as you know, as we're talking about it, all of those things really work into it. How to be responsible consumers and humans out in the world. So I just really, I love that, but I really feel as a parent of young, you know, teenagers, that it's important for me and other people around that they see a good model of that and what that looks like.
Exactly. And we've talked a lot about what kids are doing in schools, but what they're honestly, their family is the strongest influence on their political, we call it political socialization. And there's nothing stronger than the family and on that political socialization. And so, yeah, what you do at home, what you model, what you talk about around the dinner table, those things all have a big impact and much stronger than anything we can, and anything we do in school. Honestly, we can do our best in school, but the family is their biggest influence.
And one of the conferences that the Center for Constitutional Studies and our Civic Thought and Leadership Initiative, one of the conferences we will put on in the future will focus on civics and the home, you know, how civics is modeled, how it's taught in the home. So
Yeah, that should be October.
Yeah, like Glori says, like we can be so inspired by the younger generation. When our team about once a month has an op-ed published in the Deseret News on the theme of civics and civility. And we all know you never read the comments, but I have read a few of the comments, and it's these crazy adults on both extremes just yelling at each other and usually not really talking at all about the content of the op-ed. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, let's just shush those adult crazies on both sides and let's focus on seeing what our children are doing, what our teenagers are doing. Another thing I wanted to say is that in our position, we are asked to teach one course a semester, and fall semester, I got to make up my own course and do Women in American Political Thought, and it was so cool. And yet, because it's a small upper level class, I needed to teach something else this semester. And so I'm teaching that American government course that Glori taught at the AP and CE and regular levels. And at first I was so nervous. And then once I got into it, I'm like, this is exactly, you know, what I've become so jazzed about with my work with MWEG. You know, so we had a chapter just last week where we talked about voting, and where we talk about media literacy. That'll be a chapter I do next week. These are the things that we talk about the Constitution and the Federalist, anti-Federalist debates, and all these topics that I feel like I get to teach my students and share with them knowledge that I have learned from my involvement with MWEG. And that's been really, really rewarding and fun.
Yeah, this has been so great. I would encourage anybody that's watching our video to go to the MWEG website, go to the About Us tab even, and start there and kind of see and go down the principles of ethical government and see, you know, principled citizen, like we were saying, practical peacemaking, and you know, media literacy, all of those things that make you a good citizen, that make and then go take the human element of it and teach it to your families and go out and share it with your neighbors and in your communities, because that's what we need most. Is we need model citizens that can do these things that are not necessarily natural or easy to us, and model them for other people, and especially our kids. So thank you so much for sharing that information and being with me today on the Grow. You know, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about our conference that's coming up and some of what we have talking about. We have a panel from Girls Lobby, and that's such a great example of a younger group of women young women that are out there and doing good things in their communities, being good civic citizens. And
Yeah.
so that's a great example of what you guys are talking about, is taking these rules of law and then putting them into action in their communities. So thank you so much for being with me, Glori and Lisa, and thank you for what you're doing at Utah Valley University and for National Civics Learning Week. So we're so glad that you guys were with us today.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you for all that MWEG does.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.